Hello everyone. Welcome to the ATAR Notes lecture for creating text exploring the framework of personal journeys. My name is Sunny. I'm really excited to be delivering this lecture to you all today, and I hope that you find this particularly useful given the recent changes in the study design. And I'm sure there's some surrounding confusion about how to navigate frameworks. We'll be doing a lot of this session to get ideas for writing, looking at examples, and talking through the mentor text and analyzing them. You can see on this slide some of the resources that ATAR Notes has to offer if you need some additional help and resources with your study. And let's get right into the lecture for today. So I'll begin by introducing myself. My name is Sunny, as I mentioned. I completed my VCE in 2021 with an ATAR of 96.70. I received a study score of 44 in English, as well as I did all three English subjects. So I did English, literature, and English language. And I'm currently in my last year of completing a Bachelor of Paramedicine degree at Monash University. So you can see the goals for today and the objectives, but you can also follow along on the bottom bar. As you can see, first we'll be exploring the framework of personal journeys, as well as the many ideas that you can explore in your creative writing. Then we'll be moving to analyze mentor texts from the study design and how they respond to the framework and they can inspire your own authorial decisions. This will include looking at textual features and really doing that close analysis that's intended with this new study design. So that will be particularly useful in understanding the importance of audience, context, and purpose, which many students I've personally noticed are kind of struggling with. So we'll be breaking down how they incorporated or a clear audience, a clear context, and a very clear purpose relating to the framework, which is what you must replicate in your own writing. So all of your language and techniques and structural features that you incorporate when you write need to be targeting a clear audience. There must be, a clear message also as well embedded throughout your piece relating to your framework. We'll be looking at an exemplar piece, responding to the framework, and see how it does all of those things as well, and looking at how to write a reflective commentary and also looking at an example. All right, let's get started. Let's talk about the framework first. So personal journeys are forms of physical and non-physical travel or change that have a distinct beginning and end and concern or affect a person or multiple people. This framework is probably the most broad framework of the four that have been assigned for creating text area of study. And I think it's like really great because you can write about your own experiences as well. Everyone has had personal journeys, and it's nice and broad, not limiting you to writing about anything specific. So it can even be physical travel. It can be physical journeys that you've undertaken, whether like local or international. And then the non-physical travel that should focus around this idea of someone's life story or life journey, such as writing in the form of a memoir or your own life. And that should focus around the concept of change or personal growth or both. So, if you're writing in a persuasive style, you can explore what sort of values are important in one's life, what sort of experience are significant and shape someone's life. So there is so much inspiration that you can take and different things that you can do with this framework. The definition given by Vika is deliberately broad and it's trying to give you as many different ways of writing about the framework as possible. They're essentially all these different explorations of life, all the various experiences that life involves. And you can write pieces focusing on one single experience or many different experiences, or in a really broad sense, how someone attains personal growth or how a specific person or you learn something or attain personal growth. Even that idea of identity is something that you can write about, how your identity has changed, how ideas like growing up, all of these significant experiences. So this is what Vika has outlined on the study design, explorations of life, or biographical explorations. Anything around telling stories, telling our stories, telling other stories, the problem of telling stories, appropriation of stories, who tells the stories and our history, who shapes history, missing stories, marginalized, elevated stories. You can explore things like personal milestones, key experiences in life. You can talk about growing up, key events in your life, or explore any of these ideas through eyes of others. So you don't need to personally experience an experience, but you can write about it from the perspective of someone who has. Students who have unique experiences like migration can explore their stories of movement and disruption, and that includes even, you can write about something like moving schools, moving within the country. You can explore change in a broad sense. That's what you need to explore, change. And messages should be around change to a person. So we've split this into a few like different ideas and sections that we'll talk about to help get inspiration with this framework. And one is the journey of growing up, which would be relevant to most students, obviously. And, that can be associated with turning a certain age, and that can be associated with, in a way, with, going towards adulthood, which is what you'd be experiencing as year 12 students. You see a lot of things changing and expectations and responsibilities. It can also be marked by milestones like starting or leaving high school or going to a year 12 formal, for example. For others, growing up could be defined by gaining greater freedoms and responsibilities that can come with these freedoms, and that can be explored in your writing. And it could also be considered in terms of knowledge. So as you get older, you learn more things and you come to understand more about yourself, your identity, the world, and your place in it. So the thought of growing up could also elicit certain feelings that you should explore for an effective piece if you want to choose this topic. So anxiety as you're approaching adulthood and you don't know what the future holds. So a lot of students in year 12 experience anxiety, thinking about the future, thinking about uni, getting into your course, thinking about moving out. Regret for not having enjoyed or made the most of childhood, or excitement for freedom and opportunities that can come with adulthood. An effective piece could potentially put both of those feelings in, anxiety and excitement at the same time. There's also the journey of love. Love can be thought of as a journey, relationships in general, even friendships. So, familial love, all of those things like coming to understand and appreciate your parents more as you get older. Um, a long friendship that you've had with a friend that's really important to you, and how your relationship, the journey of your friendship. Um, and then if we focus on love, it could be actually, two journeys, such as falling in love and falling out of love. A piece could explore both of those feelings. So that helps to explore a lot of feelings and get a lot of meaning for your piece. When you fall in love and you get romantic feelings, you can explore the intense, life altering feelings. And then when you fall out of love, it can be rapid, intense, and life altering as well. Some prominent feelings that might relate to relationship journeys could be hope, fear, loneliness, excitement, and of course, love, because we said it doesn't have to be about love. Something that some students like to think about is exploring concepts through some kind of framework, or even like a model proposed by a psychologist or things like that. So for love, there is an ancient Greek model that you might be interested in writing about, and effectively, if you use a framework or a theory as a basis for your writing, it helps with structure, especially if you prefer writing in an informative or persuasive style rather than an imaginative style. And if that's the case, you might prefer writing opinion pieces, feature articles, speeches, and things like that. And you might choose to take inspiration or go through a psychological theory, for example, and write about that. So the journey of love, that can be split into agape, eros, and philia. So agape is love between romantic partners or between parents and their children, kind of like that familial love. It's profound, it's selfless. No matter what that person does, you can forgive them and you will love them like your parents. Eros can be passionate physical attraction, and philia can be your close platonic connections and your friendships. The journey of grief can also be explored through a framework. So again, helps for persuasive writers, but also helps for imaginative writers because you understand how to express the different emotions and stages associated with something. So grief can be a significant experience, and it can be a significant experience to write about, even if you haven't experienced it as well. So everyone eventually has to deal with the death of someone close to us. It can also be thought of as a journey, and the psychologist Kubler-Ross has conceptualized this really popular model of grieving into 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So over the course of that journey, the person grieving has to come to terms with their loss, and the experience of or the journey of grief can be an interesting topic. I'm trying to give some non-basic ideas for personal journeys to help understand and expand your understanding of the framework. So this model means that if someone can progress to acceptance, they might be stuck in depression. So this is like where you see like mental health issues and really hanging on to the fact that you lost this person, not being able to accept that you've lost someone important. And the people don't move through them in a linear way. So they might reach the stage of acceptance and bounce back to denial. They might reach the stage of bargaining and then never experience depression and just progress to acceptance. So that's an interesting model to look into if you're interested as a basis for writing. And as a note on personal journeys, I feel like I brought this up in a little bit of detail. The key ideas and things that you need to address with the framework are change and development, or you can say that personal growth that I mentioned across the journey of life, and how journeys do not start in the same way as they end. So you're looking for change. If you're writing about an experience, how has that experience changed you or someone? Okay, why is it important? So our knowledge changes, our personality changes, our environment changes, or we may physically change. And these are the different things that you can explore. So as our environment changes or we have a life-altering experience, so must we change. So personal journeys can be about many different experiences inherent to life, the lessons that you can gauge from those experiences, and even the changes we undergo throughout our lives. Journeys can be also explored in the form of stories. So, the study design, and we looked at in the table before, it specifically mentions biographical explorations and telling our stories. So this can be things like stories about life, and whether that's your own life or the lives of other people. So oftentimes biographical explorations can be non-fictional, but they can be presented with a lot of creative flair. So if you like writing in forms like short story, memoir, you like that imaginative style, this is a really solid idea. And you can fabricate stories entirely. They can be absolutely about anything. Often the focus of a biographical exploration is on a single one individual, one person, and their personal journey, how they change, and what they learn as a result of their life experience. So this is intended to lead to a greater understanding of who that person was and how they came to be that way. How have they changed? Personal journeys can also be about stories, both our own and the stories of others. So for instance, you could write from a perspective of someone that you admire or you look up to, or a made up older person reflecting on their life, reflecting back on their life and some of the key experiences or events that have shaped them. So, and even writing about stories themselves. Now, physical journeys. Lots of ideas here as well. I mentioned the idea of writing about travel, trips, or holidays. And that doesn't need to be, international. Or if you get really creative with it, you can travel to a made-up country, a fictional country that you create, traveling to space, and even those things like moving houses or places that you live, such as from suburb to suburb, are examples of physical journeys you can write about with this framework. So all of these are journeys as well. And, you can discuss that journey from a personal perspective, such as focusing on the subjective, how it makes you feel, personal experience of that journey. And that's exactly what makes this personal writing in personal journeys. So here's an example of a prompt. The 30% of the population in Australia were born overseas or migrated to Australia. So if you've got an experience like that, that's going to be a basis for a springboard for a very, very impactful piece with a very impactful message. So, what was it like to settle in a different country, just to a new culture, way of living, or language? Did you have experiences such as struggling to establish a sense of belonging? How has that changed for you? That's a really impactful thing to explore that will apply to some students. And you can make it really, really personal, which is what this framework, it wants you to write in a very personal style, even if you're not writing from the perspective of yourself. So here's a summary of some of the topics that you may choose to explore with personal journeys: life and its experiences or events that lead to or involve change, development, or discovery. We're talking about it in a really broad way now, but I gave a lot of examples before as I talked about the different ideas. Journeys of growth, love, grief, relationships as life defining experiences, biographical and autobiographical writing, and writing about stories as a means of conveying personal journeys. Even you can even write about something like reading a book in a way, because that's a bit of a personal journey that you experience through someone else without having the actual experience. But you can learn a lesson from that as well. The purpose of stories and storytelling in our culture and history, and that can include writing about First Nations people and storytelling within their culture as well. And some more ideas. Complications arising from stories and storytelling. If you're a bit of a history buff, there's the saying that those who win in wars and things like that, they write the history of anything. So how accurate is our history really? That could be a springboard for a creative, but also a persuasive piece as well. Storytelling as an act of power and as a tool for social advancement and learning from past mistakes as a society or as a country, learning from our mistakes in a more broad sense. And physical journeys, travel, movement, and migration. You can also write from the perspective of, you can write about marginalized stories. So, from the perspective of someone who's been excluded or marginalized against. Okay, now we get into our mentor text. So you will be assigned to do 3 out of the 4 in all schools. There's only 4 assigned texts, and every student does 3 of them. So that means most of you are doing the exact same text as everyone else, except one text, right? So we'll be looking at them in a little bit of detail, in a good bit of detail, because the intent of the new study design is that you do close analysis of these mentor texts. And particularly, this is why we have this detailed breakdown of audience and purpose, and we'll talk about context of text as well, because the intention that is that you will also plan before you write a very specific audience, very specific purpose with links to personal journeys and a very specific context, and that has to be reflected throughout your authorial choices. So all of your language and structural features targeting your specific audience, and that can be seen. There is a context established in your piece. If there is a persona, it's clear who the persona is, and a clearly embedded message that isn't just like stuck on at the end of your piece or something like that. So looking at these texts really helps with getting some ideas about how to write, structure, and put a piece together of any text type, because anything is a mentor text if it's the text type that you want to write in. It helps you to structure your piece, learn about language devices and structural features that you can use and how to do it, inspires you, and helps you to fulfill the VCA criteria especially when it comes to audience, purpose, context. They've stressed it a lot. And understanding how to write in an imaginative style, in a persuasive style, in an informative style effectively. So the first one that we'll look at is Red Plastic Chair is a Vietnamese cultural institution and my anchor. I'll just refer to it as the Red Plastic Chair, very long title. Um, it's written by a young Vietnamese Australian writer. So we see a dual cultural identity, and that's important for the context of this piece. And it's in the form of a short story slash personal recount because it uses a lot of anecdotal evidence and reflections. The audience was the SBS 2020 Emerging Writers Competition, where this was submitted, and Australian readers in a broad context, because there's a lot of people that are first generation or second generation immigrants in Australia. And the purpose is to reflect on the author's relationship with her cultural identity and the integral motive of the red plastic chair that symbolizes the importance of family. So this text has so many different purposes related to personal journeys. It shows change in the author's perception of her cultural identity to understand that she has, a dual cultural identity, both Vietnamese and Australian, and that she should appreciate both, as well as change in her relationship with family. She learns to appreciate much, much, much more the value of family and the experiences of her family members as first generation immigrants. And she can understand why they're different. Okay, so the red plastic chair, it centers around this motive, recurring symbol of a red plastic chair as a representation of profound cultural and personal significance to the author and her Vietnamese heritage. This is an item that often appears within their culture, these red plastic chairs, and she attaches a personal significance to it and lots of symbolic meaning. The story weaves themes of identity, generational divides, and the enduring power of the bonds of family in exploring how cultural traditions, memories, and language all connect and shape the lives of immigrant families, how there's so much more to it. So, the red plastic chair is initially just depicted as a symbol of Vietnamese culture. It's described in so much detail, like little things like its square top, the hole in the middle, cheap plastic legs. She really puts a lot of thought into this description. So, despite the humble appearance and the fact that it's a cheap chair, it has that special place in Vietnamese culture and their street food traditions where these chairs are often seen, and it represents a lot of memories and cultural connections. So it's a cultural emblem that represents hospitality, togetherness, and shared experiences of Vietnamese families in a foreign land. So the author humorously uses humor, the social significance of the chairs within the Vietnamese diaspora, which is the Vietnamese context. Lending or borrowing a stack of these red plastic chairs within families establishes an unspoken social contract. And this is a quote from the piece. Let's begin a back and forth of favors until one of us dies. So it shows there's a culture of generosity within Vietnamese culture that's often propelled by borrowing these chairs, and then it's like you did a favor, so the other person is comfortable to ask you a favor, and it's back and forth, helping each other out. And this good will extend from one event to another until inevitably the stack of chairs is brought to the funeral. So we see the humor there as well. So it's underscoring the endurance of the red plastic chairs and that they represent very, very strong bonds, not only within culture, but between people within that Vietnamese context. So the author examines the cultural and generational gaps as well as a form of personal journey that exists between immigrant parents and their Australian born children. So that there's a really big divide and difference between the experiences of second generation immigrants, such as the author, and first generation immigrants who were born in their country and they've moved. And that initially, when she's young, she wasn't able to understand this as much and appreciate her family as much as she does now. That's a change. That's a personal journey that the author has undertaken. So the protagonist reflects on their own linguistic assimilation, shedding their native languages in favor of English, and she recognizes that this is a way that she has distanced herself from her culture upon reflection. So this deliberate distance from their cultural heritage becomes a source of inner conflict as she has to confront her own identity and her own heritage and establish a sense of belonging. So the protagonist's mother sets out again that repeated motive of a red plastic chair and presents a bowl of carefully sliced fruit, setting aside the sweetest pieces as a quiet gesture of love and selflessness. And a lot of these things in the piece are unspoken, these gestures of kindness. And the protagonist's realization of the depth of the gesture is heartwarming and bittersweet at the same time. This is why the red plastic chair also serves as an anchor to memory and heritage, and it represents the bridge between the past and present, between cultural traditions and assimilation, for those emotions that she's attaching to that chair. So, purposes, linking it back to personal journeys, it's a moving exploration of complexities of immigrant identity, generational divides, and that enduring power of familial bonds. By adopting the lens of an ordinary plastic chair, the story tries to shed light on the huge weight of cultural traditions and the gestures that bind families together. And it prompts readers, the audience, to reflect on their own connections to heritage and the significance of everyday objects that carry memories or carry history. And it's trying to serve as a tribute to the lives of immigrant individuals and families and their journeys and the challenges that they have undergone. And it honors those unspoken sacrifices and the journeys of family relationships as well, essentially. So, multiple themes, we've talked about all of these as well. But a key thing is obviously because this is a reflection, this is all about the author's changing sense of self. Her personal journey, understanding the significance of her family, understanding the significance of what it means to migrate and what her family has experienced, understanding that she belongs to both cultures, both Australian and Vietnamese, and she should just appreciate both, her cultural identity. All of those are aspects of her personal journey. So this is really a packed text. The author also explores the journey of her aunt, not directly herself, and that she endured significant hardships as a first generation immigrant. Her journey from China to Vietnam to Australia is marked by resilience, sacrifice, a pursuit of better life, and the message around that is it's a testament to the enduring strength of immigrants and their sacrifices. So the personal this personal journey highlights that transformative power of reflection and introspection when you contemplate your significant life experiences and maybe that those of your family, how much value that can bring to your life and you as a person to reflect on those things. So we can say that's the overall message. The most prominent feature is that motive of the red plastic chair. This is a great idea as a springboard for your own creative writing. Is there some kind of clear symbol or repeating image or idea that you can plop in your piece and attach emotions and therefore messages and additional meanings to it? It's a really great way to, as well, if you struggle with different forms of creative writing, to address that problem because then you've taken something relatively simple, just one symbol or repeating image, and you attach all those things to it, and therefore you've got all of this implicit meaning within your piece. So the significance of this red plastic chair through the scenes in which it is seen and when it's talked about, it keeps evolving over the course of her reflection. So that's how it's not just a metaphor, but it's a recurring motive, a recurring symbol and imagery in the text. So it acts as a symbol of continuity between generations, an anchor to memory, a bridge between past and present. And it invites all the readers to consider, any everyday objects that are significant in their lives. And she also uses vivid imagery to paint a picture of her cultural context. So we said we need to think about audience, purpose, context. We see all of this has been done. She even has descriptions of the streets of Saigon and, the carefully sliced fruit, and tries to evoke a lot of sensory experiences that really immerse her readers. Additional textual features, she's created an intimate and personal voice, which is typical of a personal reflection. So we can see features that you'd expect writing in this text type, and a blend of present day events and reflective moments. So it's a slightly non-linear narrative. And there's also intentionally placed awkward dialogue between the protagonist and their mother, emphasizing that they've got a language barrier and a generational gap between first generation and second generation, immigrants. And that's as a result of her own cultural assimilation. So how could you use the red plastic chair as a mentor text if you really liked it and you're really inspired by it? You could explore the personal journey of another object. I drew on this idea, just like the red plastic chair. You could attach, a recurring motive to your piece as well, something that has significance to you, or a made-up object. You could write a personal narrative in which someone born in a different country explores cultural roots and a journey of reconnecting with their heritage, language, and traditions later when they're older, and the kinds of challenges and, feelings relating to belonging that might accompany that journey for them. And, for persuasive or informative writers, you could, for instance, write a feature article in which you interview people of different ages and backgrounds about their experiences with migration and cultural assimilation. And you could add a comparative aspect to it. See what are the common things and different things that they've experienced. All right, another mentor text is The Danger of a Single Story by Adichie, and she is a Nigerian author. This was in the form of a speech delivered at a TED Talk in 2009. And of course, her audience will be attendees at this global conference and, any international viewers online, because TED Talks get a lot of views. So her purpose was to argue for the importance of diverse representation in stories and storytellers, and to express the importance of listening to other perspectives and other people's stories and hearing their voices. So the speech opens with her introducing herself as a storyteller herself, and this limited cultural input shaped her view of what stories could be, resulting in her replicating elements of the stories, like playing in the snow or talking about the weather, even though such things had no relevance to her experiences in Nigeria, which she talks about. So she aims to show that stories do more than just entertain, and that they can also shape our beliefs and perceptions and our identities, that they're subjective, and hearing people's stories helps us to understand more about the world. They're not just a form of entertainment, and that they're instruments of power and influence. And we can see that this is her message as pertaining to the framework of personal journeys, stressing the importance of personal stories and how much value they can bring. So Adichie recounts how Africa is often depicted in Western media as a continent riddled with poverty, disease, and conflict. And she is arguing that this could be true in some cases, but it's completely ignorant depiction of the continent. So this story robs people of their dignity and the complexity of their human experiences. She's showing both sides, people that don't know any better and they've got their own preconceptions and they don't listen, they don't want to know more. And she stresses the importance of understanding the power of people's stories and how much value they can bring. She gives another example of a college professor who once told her that her novel could not be authentically African because it lacked the expected elements such as poverty and suffering. So she's showing, giving examples of that bias to really denounce it. So let's talk about the context as well. We know TED Talks are intended to spread influential ideas, and Adishi's ultimate purpose is to advocate for diverse storytelling that can also combat prejudices, stereotypes, and ignorance. So she's stressing the importance of hearing people's voices to help us better understand the world and rid ourselves of prejudice and preconceptions. So she skillfully weaves her own personal journey as a reader and a writer into the broader exploration of the dangers of single narratives. And her experiences are supposed to be a representation for this as a larger phenomenon in broader society, and serves as a cautionary tale of being stuck in one perspective. We see a beautiful quote. What struck me was this: she felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position towards me as an African was a kind of patronizing, well meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way. No possibility of feelings more complex than pity. No possibility of a connection as human equals. So we can see her personal journey embedded within, and we can see the journey that she wants other people to undertake by accepting the significance of other people's stories. So she reminds individuals that craft personal narratives of their responsibilities when telling their stories, and to consider the impact potentially on other people by telling our stories. So it's an integral responsibility and part of her personal journey as a writer in her career. So she's kind of showing that writers have that power to shape the personal journeys of their readers by creating these fictional or non fictional narratives that hold significant meaning. So, if you were to use this as a mentor text, some ideas, you could write a short story that also challenges a common stereotype or a single story narrative. So, you can address this idea of stories as well. And if you're writing about stories, answering the question, did you feel represented by stories you read or the media that you consumed in childhood or now? Or there's those some things that stick out to you as biased or untrue? And limiting other people's ability to express their personal journeys as well. You could write a reflective piece in the form of a personal essay about how you were shaped by literature, by reading, or by media. This could be in the form of persuasive writing as well. And you could also choose to write snippets or vignettes from multiple perspectives in order to convey the importance of different points of view. Write a letter to a famous author or a filmmaker or someone that inspires you in general, anyone, whose work perpetuates a single story or stereotype. So that could be a person you critique, that you're writing to, and you're trying to constructively critique their portrayal. Or you could write to someone you admire about their story and how it has inspired you, their life story or the work that they've done. Now we'll look at Bingin by Maya Hodge. She's Lardell and Youngcall, emerging writer. This is a short story published in 2021, and her audience was this SBS 2021 Emerging Writers Competition, where she was submitting this, and in a broader sense, Australian writers. The purpose of the short story is to reflect on the complexity of Aboriginal experiences, their stories, and the enduring power of cultural heritage. So the short story examines a young Lardell girl and her brother as they navigate a really challenging upbringing, and it leaves them with, quote, invisible scars in Lache Lache country. So despite growing up in a town that's marked by racism towards Indigenous people and drug-related issues, they are able to, their personal journeys, that they find solace in the beauty of their surroundings, especially the winding river and eucalyptus trees. So we can see physical elements of a personal journey as well through this, their adventures. The siblings' experiences were marked by resilience, love, and the ability to find joy amidst adversity. So if you combine physical and emotional elements of physical and personal elements of a personal journey. That's a great way to differentiate your piece and make it a lot stronger, because this has that physical element of adventure and then the personal element of finding joy amidst adversity. So that makes a piece really clearly and meaningfully incorporate a framework and leads to a complex idea being developed. So the narrative delves into the generational strength that runs through the girl's family as well. For instance, her great grandmother Ida is celebrated as a cultural leader and a warrior woman. Her legacy is felt through the descendants, including the mother of the girl, who carries the torch of cultural knowledge and resilience. So, this story aims to share Aboriginal culture and experiences to a wider audience, to a broader Australian context. What she's trying to do for the Australian audience is to educate and raise awareness about the enduring connections um, for Indigenous people to their land and to their country and its cultural significance. And it also highlights those experiences like racism and adversity to foster empathy and show how strong people are in navigating these experiences. So she's got a deep level of respect for Indigenous culture within her writing and like a commitment to authenticity. There are lots of cultural traditions, Aboriginal terminology, beliefs that are present in this story and expressed in this story. Other textual features, there's lots of vivid imagery and descriptive language to bring the landscape and emotions to life and create these physical journeys too. So that the reader can visualize things like the winding river, the eucalyptus trees, the dusty landscapes. And symbolism and metaphors are really important in conveying the themes of this story. So the river, for instance, doesn't just represent a physical landscape, but also a source of connection to country, that spiritual connection. Locked memories and keys symbolize the girl's journey of self-discovery and healing as well, her personal journey, and that reflects that those deeper emotional layers of the narrative. So if you were aiming to use this as a mentor text, some of the things that you can do, you could write a creative piece that reflects on this idea of unlocking the past, which is what she's done here. You could write a personal reflection about your own connection to a specific place, maybe places where you grew up, places where you used to play, the significance of home to you, and how that has, because the framework has to be about change, personal growth, how that has changed for you now when you reflect upon a place that is really important to you. Um, the story also expresses the power of artistic expression as a means of conveying emotions and connections. So you could write an article that explains this phenomenon, um, such as talking about how art is used to convey people's personal journeys, or delving into the psychology of things like art or cultural expression within society. Okay, so now we'll take a look at an exemplar piece of writing, and this is in the form of a short story. So as we read this, let me double check how long this is. Quite long. As we read this, I want you to be thinking about what is this piece about? How does it incorporate personal journeys, specifically the framework, and what do you think the message is behind it? Is there a specific target audience that we can outline? And what is the context of the piece? Those three elements. And have a look for how you think it incorporates the short story form well and what kind of language devices and structural features are present. The room is emptier than I thought it would be. There were almost 200 of us when we graduated, but gathered here are 30, maybe 40 people. And it's not like I was early. I got here 10 minutes early, saw the empty parking lot, drove around the block, parking lot was still empty, drove down 2 blocks, parked, walked back over, got scared, walked around the block, still scared, pretended to take a phone call in the corner, walked around the block, walked back to the car, got in the car, got out of the car, walked halfway back, walked to the car, got in the car, parked closer to the school, convinced myself to get the hell in there, and finally got the hell in there. So we can see this really long convoluted. This is a run-on sentence that helps to express anxiety and frantic feelings that um, the protagonist is feeling as he's approaching the school reunion. And we see the context was established really early on, that this is a school reunion. So there's going to be lots of elements of introspection about this protagonist's personal journey from when he was in school to now, when he's at this school reunion, and all the people that he grew up with, their personal journeys, those elements. So clear links to the framework. And we can see the audience will probably be a bit more general, might be just targeting like young people or people that have had that are in the similar kind of age group, like they've recently or semi recently maybe finished school, so they're reflecting on they'd be interested in reflecting on where they are at now in life and whether they're happy with that. Let's keep reading. Yeah, sorry I'm late. Traffic was so bad. The lady in front of me, Janet, her name tag tells me, nodded knowingly. Well, I'm just going to have to tick your name off, and you're good to go. Thanks so much. You're welcome. Janet scrunches up her face in a smile and tilts her head towards the side of the entryway. Okay, Janet, I can take the hint. So we see some attitude being incorporated. Dialogue is being used effectively. You never want to write a short story that doesn't skillfully incorporate dialogue, and the problems are having no dialogue or very little, or it's unnatural, such as if you write, more than a line of dialogue at a time, unless someone's telling a story, that's just like two people talking at a wall, because in a conversation, both people should take turns speaking. So long dialogue is also a big issue that I see with students. So we'll skip through a little bit because you can pause and read this more. I just don't see the benefit of me reading over the whole thing. Let's go into the last couple of pages. We'll read these. So the protagonist is talking to another person that he went to school with. Yeah, well, life's been pretty good, Med school's almost over, so later this year I'll be working in the real world, training on the job. He still does those strange little circular arm movements like he's running, or a kid pretending to be a train. So this is his old schoolmate, and he's kind of bragging. Oh wow, yeah, that's great news. I know we're all adults now, and 5 years is a long time, but most of the people here will probably already be working, yada da. But actually working in hospitals with actual patients feels like a little bit much for a 23-year-old, right? What about you? Got some fancy postgrad scholarship somewhere in Europe? As he tells me this, he's got that competitive look in his eye. I know that look because I used to have it too. That same look from when we were in year 9 English and he'd ask me what mark I got, wondering if he beat me. I was better at English than him in year 9, but I think he's won the imaginary competition against me now. I gave up the fight after year 12. Haha, yeah, nah. I try to sound casual, but a sharp inhale through my teeth gives it all away. A part of me wants to tell him that I only rocked up because my therapist won't stop going on about putting myself out there and meeting people and managing avoidant behaviors, and how I dropped out of uni and now work in a failing bookshop. But that look is contagious. It was back then, and it still is now. So all I do is say, just taking things slow and working things out. Adulting is tough. You know how it is. I come off as more casual this time, probably because I actually mean what I say, even if it isn't the whole truth. He's disappointed, I know that, but also sympathetic? Yeah, I get it, man. He always spoke with such conviction, so I waited for him to say more, but we end up just standing there. I guess neither of us have any answers. It's good to see you again, you know that? He says to me. Yeah, it's good to see you too. It's really good to see you. We share a Janet smile. It's a bit of a recurring motif that was incorporated here. We know that Janet's smile was very fake when he walked in, with where he said, okay, Janet, I can take the hint. So it's kind of done a little bit. Obviously, the piece is a lot shorter, but it's kind of done something like with the red plastic chair that we looked at. It's tried to bookend by incorporating this kind of idea that's associated with anxious and icky feelings. And he's bookended it by putting that at the start and putting that at the end. But now the meaning of it has kind of changed because it represents how he's also disappointed with himself and his personal journey. So this short story does this really well because it explores what he was like in school and what his classmate was like in school, and how all of that has changed now that he's 23 and he feels that he's failing at adulting and he doesn't have life figured out. He's got all these problems in mental health, and um, it's not a positive, it's not an uplifting story, but it definitely touches on change, what it was like when he was in school, and he was also happier. He had this, he was competitive, he was a bit of an overachiever, and now everything's going wrong. He dropped out of uni, he doesn't have a secure job, etc., etc. So it explores change very well, a personal journey very well. Okay, beautiful. So now we'll have a short chat about the reflective commentary. This is worth 20 out of 100 marks for your overall unit free SAC marks that contribute to your study score. And creating text in general, like you can see, it contributes 60 out of 100 to your unit free SAC marks. So it's really significant. Aim to do well in this area of study. Now, there's a lot of writing and ideas and questions to prompt you on this, like a bit in the slides about the reflective commentary. But essentially, what you need to understand is that the reflective commentary, in a very simple sense, is a very, very short piece. It's usually, 400, maybe maximum 500 words for students. That is essentially an analyzing argument essay written in first person, analyzing the authorial decisions you have made in your creative piece. So it's a lot like an analyzing argument essay of your own work. But this is where you have to put a lot of planning to decide what is relevant for you to mention. Do you want to analyze some of the vocabulary, text structure, language features, genre conventions, views and values? So your messages, your purpose, your themes, and your big ideas. There's just some of the ideas, You can explore anything from you used purposely a non-linear narrative in your piece with flashbacks or jumping through time, or you adopted a certain tone or a certain voice to your piece that you want to explore. So it's all up to you, but it requires, because it's such a short piece, it requires a lot of selectivity to choose the most significant and impactful things that you've done to impress your assessor. And whenever you analyze any of these things, especially if it's structural features, you should be always quoting and naming using the appropriate meta language the features that you've put in your text. And when you analyze, specifically bring it back to analyzing in terms of personal journeys. So, what is this structural feature that I'm analyzing ultimately say about personal journeys or contribute significance about personal journeys in my piece? Or you can also analyze in terms of I use the structural feature to appeal to my target audience, because we know that you need a clearly outlined audience as well. So how would this feature or vocabulary, just a standard quote in your piece, how does it influence your audience and posit them in a certain way? Or what does it make them think about? What does it make them feel? So it's just that. It's like an analyzing argument of your own piece written in first person as well. It shouldn't be informal. You should still write in a formal style, but you will be using I, me, myself. Like, you use first person because you wrote this piece. These are some of the things you can explore. There's just some ideas and some questions to prompt you, but you do need to plan what you're going to write about. And you kind of plan for a reflective commentary before you even start writing your creative, because you need to make sure, you got those free elements that I keep mentioning and enough to analyze. You've got enough structural features in there as well. This is the criteria. So your reflective commentary has to explicitly state your purpose. You need to be able to put your purpose of your piece into a very beautiful couple of sentences that are really nice and clear and complex. That's going to go in your reflective commentary, because the bulk of the marks for this area of study lies in having a complex idea and purpose behind your piece. And, you know, your teacher is not going to read your creatives separately from your reflective commentary. They're going to read them side by side to help understand your authorial intent because they can interpret it differently from what you're trying to do. None of us, none of the English students are authors or writers, so it's difficult to express ideas that you have in your mind to put that down on the paper and do a really good job. That's why the reflective commentary is really important, and it's a bit of a crutch because if you're trying to put a certain message across but it's too implicit in your writing or it could be interpreted in a different way, this is your chance to then explain that. What were you trying to do with the framework? What were the efforts that you put into your piece and some of the structural features and things that you did as an author? So really important. And you are expected, and this is in the second dot point of the VCA criteria, you need to analyze your own piece, quoting and examining the authorial choices that have been made. So if you're a student, this is an unstructured task, but if you're a student that likes to structure things, this is the structure for your first paragraph. So start by outlining the form. This is where you introduce the title of your piece, what it is about, and what text type it is. And if you've used a particular genre, you will state the genre of your piece here as well. So that makes sense to start this way. In my opinion, I would move C for context up to go after form because audience, purpose, context, we need those elements. So where does it make the most sense to attach context and talk about the context of your piece and a persona if you've adopted it? Right after form. Okay? Then you should state some of your main language choices that pervade your piece and what were you trying to do with them? Why are they important? What they add to your piece? So if you wrote in a persuasive style, this will be in the form of mentioning some of the main persuasive language techniques that you've used that might be repeating in your piece or might be the most significant types of persuasive language techniques. If you're writing in an imaginative style, like short story, memoir, it could be something like imagery, metaphors that you will state here. Then you outline as specifically as possible your audience and as specifically as possible your purpose. And that serves as your first big paragraph. So you'll have more paragraphs that are just quotes and analysis in relation to the framework of your authorial choices. You don't need a conclusion for this, so I would just end by, in my final sentence, restating my purpose one more time. So this is how you can follow a comprehensive structure for the reflective commentary if you'd like. And remembering this flap C, everyone should remember this anyway because these are the things that must be in your reflective commentary, the elements that have to be in there. But you can also write in an unstructured way, and the reflective commentary example that we'll look at is exactly that. It's a pretty unstructured, okay, snippet from a reflective commentary. So I said you must use first person, but you should still write in a formal style. So these are some examples of that, and also some signpost sentences and sentence frames that you can use to help you with that. Because this is a short task, and because this is not something that you're used to writing potentially, feel free to make use of signposts. If you signpost a lot, it's not a big deal. If you want to, I always used to write, we still had like creative assessments on the old study design, but they weren't, they used to be based on a text. And we used to write something very similar to this called the description of the writing process. One thing that I found helped me with structure is, yeah, not confining myself to anything and just having like lots of really short little paragraphs. Um, Not entirely typical of an essay at all, right? But it really helped me with my structure. So practice it before you go into an assessment for creating text to find out what works for you. Do a reflective commentary of another piece that you have written to practice this skill. So this reflective commentary is based on the short story that we just looked at, and I've highlighted in different colors all the important things that it does, and you can see how succinct it is as well in including everything. This imaginative short story, so it states that it's imaginative and the text type. depicts a high school reunion and explores ideas of growing up, mental health, and interpersonal relationships between young adults, all of which are themes present in the bell jar. So, this is stating that it took inspiration as well from a supplementary text, from an additional text, but it depicts, is importantly, what the text is about and the context of the text. The theme of growing up connects the story to the framework of personal journeys, as growing up is a metaphorical journey. Clear link to the framework has been established. In this short story, I've reflected on the idea that growing up is a difficult process, explored how people change over time, and expressed the confusion and uncertainty of early adulthood. So, this is the purpose, the message has been outlined. The recurring motive of Janet's scrunch smile, and that's been quoted, the most important feature that stood out to us when we read, implying that it is forced and disingenuous, conveys to the reader that the narrator feels somewhat unwelcome. So we can see stating language features you've incorporated, naming them, and quoting them. It's being done. It enhances his anxiety regarding how things have changed from adolescence to adulthood. I've highlighted this because anytime you analyze any of the language features and choices that you made, you should in some way bring it back to the framework. So this in blue links back to the personal journey of growing up. However, the fact that the narrator shares this Janet smile with his former peer suggests that this awkwardness is not a unique experience, and that perhaps people can find solace in shared journeys, even when they involve negative feelings or experiences. So this serves as analysis and also adding to the purpose, adding to the message even more. So it's like another message in the piece that this example is stating. So yeah, hopefully that example helps to visualize everything. It's a really good example as well. But thank you guys for coming along to the lecture today. And I hope that you find it really helpful. Best of luck with English for the rest of the year. Thank you, everyone.